standing at 6 feet 4 inches, clad in an immaculate navy dress uniform, with the golden warfare trident insignia glinting on his chest like a beacon of warning, Lieutenant Commander Andre Bishop was more than just a soldier. He was a Tier 1 operator returning home to lay his father to rest. However, Officer Derek Rick Brody failed to perceive the rank, the commendations, or the profound sorrow etched on the face of the grieving son. All he registered was a tall, dark-skinned man occupying the wrong lane at the TSA pre-check. What Officer Brody did next, driving a Distinguished Service Medal face first into the linoleum, was a grave error. But what transpired 12 minutes later, when the Pentagon's direct line rang in the airport security chief's office, was not an act of justice. It was a meticulously orchestrated eradication. Ace, you believe you have foreseen the conclusion? You are utterly mistaken. The atmosphere within Chicago O'Hare International Airport was thick and stagnant, a recirculated blend of floor polish, lukewarm coffee, and the palpable apprehension of 5,000 individuals desperately trying to reach their destinations. For Lieutenant Commander Andre Bishop, the cacophony was merely a distant, muted hum. He navigated the concourse with the practiced, economical fluidity of a man who had spent the last 15 years deliberately conserving his energy for moments of extreme violence. He wore his service dress blues not for ostentation, but as a mark of profound respect. His father, Master Sergeant Elias Bishop, United States Army, retired, had passed away just 2 days prior. Andre had secured the earliest available flight from Dam Neck and Virginia, managing only to quickly sign his leave papers before departing. He adjusted the substantial duffel bag slung over his shoulder. It contained his civilian attire, a carefully folded American flag, and a heart burdened with grief. "Excuse me, sir. Thank you for your service," a young woman, accompanied by a toddler, murmured as he passed the Hudson News stand. Andre offered a brief controlled nod. "Thank you, Mom." His sole objective was to reach the rental car facility, embark on the 3-hour drive to his childhood residence in Kankakee, and assist his mother in selecting a casket. He glanced at his wrist, at a battle-worn Garmin tactical watch that had seen more sandy terrain than a beachcomber. 1,400 hours. He was precisely on schedule. He approached the designated exit lane near Terminal 3. Because he was traveling under military orders, even bereavement leave qualified when flying standby on a Department of Defense ticket, he proceeded towards the lane reserved for crew and military personnel, a shortcut designed to circumvent the main civilian congestion. It was at this juncture that he encountered the officer. Officer Derek Rick Brody was casually leaning against a concrete pillar, his thumbs tucked into the loops of his duty belt. Brody embodied the archetype of the officer whose peak performance occurred during his high school football career, and who had been perpetually chasing that same adrenaline rush ever since. He carried a noticeable girth around his middle, his uniform shirt strained against the buttons, and his haircut was starkly uneven, too short on the sides, excessively long on top. Lucky, Brody was profoundly bored. He had been assigned to traffic control duty within the terminal, a punitive reassignment stemming from administrative friction with his sergeant concerning an excessive force complaint filed 3 months earlier. He was actively seeking an outlet for his frustration, a target upon which to focus his simmering aggression. As Andre advanced toward the restricted exit lane, Brody pushed himself away from the pillar. He offered no signal, no verbal acknowledgement. He simply stepped directly into Andre's path, planting his feet wide apart in a deliberate obstruction. Andre halted. He did not flinch, he did not retreat, he merely ceased his forward momentum. "ID!" Brody barked. "No, sir, no, please," Andre responded, maintaining direct eye contact. His gaze was dark, composed, and eerily devoid of any discernible fear. "Good afternoon, officer. I'm exiting. I am not required to present identification to leave the secure area. However, if you are conducting checks for authorized personnel utilizing this lane, I possess the necessary credentials." Andre slowly reached into his interior jacket pocket. His movements were characterized by a deliberate slowness, a civilian pace he had consciously cultivated to avoid alarming or startling individuals who might be prone to anxiety. He produced his common access card, CAC, the standard military identification. Brody snatched it from his hand. He examined the card, then Andre, then the card again. "Lieutenant Commander, huh?" Brody sneered. He flexed the plastic card as if testing its tensile strength. "You don't appear to be a commander. And you look like you purchased that uniform from a surplus store on 47th Street. Andre inhaled deeply, deliberately. He had been awake for 36 hours. His father was deceased. He had taken lives for his country in places that did not appear on any map. He simply did not have the time or inclination for a petty officer with a badge and a personal grievance. "Officer," Andre stated, his voice resonating with a low, controlled rumble, akin to a tank idling in a cavernous garage. "That is a federal military identification. I am an active-duty naval officer. I am requesting that you return my property so that I may proceed to my family." "I will return it once I have verified it," Brody retorted, tucking the card into his own shirt pocket. "We've encountered a significant number of stolen valor cases recently. Individuals dressing up to obtain free beverages. You will wait here. Stand against the wall." Andre surveyed the wall. Then he shifted his gaze to the exit, approximately 20 feet distant. "Officer, you are capable of verifying the identification right here. Alternatively, you could contact your supervisor. I am not standing against a wall like a suspect. I have committed no infraction of any law." Brody's countenance transformed, shifting to a mottled shade of crimson. This was the precipice, the flashpoint of non-compliance. "I issued you a lawful order," Brody bellowed, his voice cracking audibly enough to draw the attention of nearby individuals. "Get against the wall. Hands behind your head now." Heads turned. Smartphones emerged. The ambient atmosphere of the airport transmuted from mere transit to a public spectacle. Andre remained motionless. "I am a commissioned officer in the United States Navy. You are detaining me without probable cause. Contact your watch commander immediately." Brody withdrew his taser. The bright yellow plastic weapon trembled subtly in his grasp. "Last warning. Get on the ground." Andre's eyes fixed on the taser. He mentally calculated the distance. 6 feet. He could disarm Brody, inflict a fracture to his wrist, and collapse his trachea before the prongs could be deployed. This entire sequence would transpire in approximately 1.2 seconds. Yet Andre did not move. He was acutely aware of the battlefield upon which he now stood. This was not Afghanistan. This was the court of public opinion and the intricate labyrinth of the American legal system. If he initiated physical contact with this officer, he would inevitably lose. "I'm not getting on the ground," Andre stated calmly. "I'm standing right here." Brody holstered the taser and drew his baton. "That's it," Brody growled. The ensuing violence, when it manifested, was characterized by awkwardness and desperation. Brody lunged forward. He lacked formal training in grappling techniques. His expertise lay in intimidation and bullying. He seized the lapel of Andre's impeccably tailored dress blues with such force that a button detached, skittering across the floor like a spent shell casing. "Stop resisting," Brody screamed for the benefit of any onlookers or recording devices, though Andre remained utterly stationary. Brody attempted a leg sweep. It was akin to trying to uproot a redwood tree. Andre remained unyielding. Thus, perceiving his diminishing advantage in front of the accumulating crowd, Brody escalated his tactics. He dropped the baton and initiated a tackle, driving his shoulder forcefully into Andre's midsection. Andre absorbed the impact. He could have maintained his upright posture, but he understood the optics involved. If he remained standing, it would be perceived as active resistance. Consequently, he permitted the laws of physics to dictate his movement. He allowed himself to fall backward. However, Brody was not content with simply executing a takedown. As they collided with the floor, Brody drove his knee into Andre's back, eliciting a distinct cracking sound, indicating a fractured rib. Andre felt it immediately. A sharp, searing wire of pain shot through his side. He gritted his teeth, steadfastly refusing to grant Brody the satisfaction of a groan. "Give me your hands," Brody yelled, wrenching Andre's left arm behind his back with sufficient torque to potentially tear a rotator cuff. Andre complied. He lay with his cheek pressed against the cold, grimy tiles. From his low vantage point he observed a pair of pink sneakers, a little girl watching him. He blinked, focusing his attention on his breathing. Inhale for 4 counts. Hold for 4. Exhale for 4. You're in a world of trouble now, boy, Brody hissed into his ear, his spittle landing on Andre's neck. Assaulting a police officer, resisting arrest, stolen valor, I'm going to bury you. Andre remained silent. He simply waited. 2 additional officers, identified as Miller and Kowalski, arrived on the scene, their breathing heavy. They observed their colleague positioned atop a man in full military dress uniform. "Rick, what the hell?" Kowalski inquired, exhibiting hesitation. "He's in dress blues, man. He attacked me," Brody lied, gasping for breath, refused to provide identification, lunged at me. "Cuff him." Kowalski surveyed the surrounding crowd. Approximately 50 smartphones were actively recording the scene. He then looked at the insignia on Andre's shoulder boards, the golden stripes denoting a lieutenant commander. A sickening sensation settled in Kowalski's stomach. "Rick, that's a commander," Kowalski whispered. "Just cuff him." Reluctantly, Kowalski snapped the cold steel cuffs onto Andre's wrists. They were tight, constricting a nerve. "Get him up," Brody commanded. They hauled Andre to his feet. His uniform was now thoroughly ruined. The dust streaks marred the dark fabric. His service cap lay nearby, crushed. The ribbon rack, bearing his silver star, 3 bronze stars with valor, and a purple heart, was askew. Andre met Brody's gaze. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. "Officer," Andre said softly. "My name is Lieutenant Commander Andre Bishop, SEAL Team 6, Red Squadron. You are in possession of my identification. In that same pocket you will also discover a folded piece of paper containing a telephone number. It is a direct line to the Joint Special Operations Command, JOC, duty desk at the Pentagon." Brody emitted a nervous, hacking laugh. "JOC, you watch too many movies. You're going to the holding cell." "Read the card," Andre insisted. Brody ignored him. He shoved Andre forward. "Walk." As they paraded him through the terminal, the crowd parted. But the prevailing mood had perceptibly shifted. It was no longer fear. It was palpable anger. "He didn't do anything," a businessman in a suit exclaimed. "I witnessed the entire incident. He was standing still. You assaulted a veteran." A woman cried out. Brody kept his eyes fixed straight ahead, his jaw clenched. He felt an overwhelming sense of power. He possessed the badge. He had the firearm. He had the prisoner. He was entirely unaware that the video meticulously recorded by a teenager named Sarah had already been uploaded to TikTok. It had garnered 10,000 views within its initial 3 minutes. By the time they reached the airport security holding area, a grim, windowless room located in the terminal's subterranean levels, the video had achieved viral status on Twitter. And in Arlington, Virginia, within the Pentagon's secure confines, a sophisticated algorithmic system designed to monitor threats against high-value assets flagged a significant surge in social media activity, incorporating keywords such as Navy SEAL, arrest, Chicago, uniform. A red light began to pulse on a dashboard in the National Military Command Center. The clock was irrevocably ticking. The holding cell exuded a potent aroma of bleach and stale urine. They directed Andre to sit on a metal bench, his hands still secured behind his back. Brody unceremoniously tossed Andre's wallet and ID onto the metal table. He then settled into a chair opposite Andre, a smug expression evident on his face. He extracted a fresh energy drink, the sharp crack of the tab echoing in the confined space. "So," Brody began. "Boys, let's process this name." "It's on the identification you pilfered," Andre replied. Brody slammed his hand onto the table. "Verbal confirmation. Name, Andre Elias Bishop. Occupation, United States Naval Officer." Brody rolled his eyes dismissively. "Right. And I'm the Pope. Look, pal, if you abandon this charade, perhaps I can speak with the district attorney and have these charges reduced to disorderly conduct. You plead guilty, pay a fine, go home, and keep this SEALed team nonsense to yourself. The stolen valor charge alone constitutes a felony in this state." Andre leaned back against the cool cinder blocks. "I require you to make a phone call." "I don't make calls for civilians," Brody stated dismissively. "This isn't for me," Andre countered. "It's for you. You have approximately He glanced at the wall clock. 7 minutes. 7 minutes until what? Until your career terminates, Andre declared. Brody emitted another laugh, though this one lacked its previous conviction. He retrieved Andre's ID once more. He examined it more closely. It featured an embedded chip. It bore a holographic overlay. It appeared to be an expensive document. Precisely at that moment, the heavy steel door creaked open. Captain Harrison, the watch commander, entered the room. Harrison was a seasoned officer, having served 30 years on the force, and was eagerly anticipating his retirement in Florida. He held a tablet in his hand, his face visibly pale. "Brody," Harrison stated, his voice trembling. "Yeah, Cap. Just processing this guy. Claims he's a SEAL. Stolen valor, resisting, assault on a PO." Harrison's gaze did not alight on Brody. Instead, it was directed toward Andre. He approached the bench, the jingle of his keys accompanying his movement. "Remove the handcuffs," Harrison whispered. Brody pushed himself to his feet. "What, Cap?" "He attacked me. He's dangerous." "Remove the damned handcuffs, Brody," Harrison roared. The sound reverberated off the concrete walls. Brody flinched. He fumbled for his keys. He unlocked the restraints. Andre rubbed his wrists. He did not rise. He looked at Captain Harrison. "Captain," Andre acknowledged. "Commander Bishop," Harrison stammered, swallowing hard. I just received a call." "From whom?" Brody inquired, looking bewildered. "His lawyer?" Harrison turned to Brody, his eyes wide with a potent mixture of fury and apprehension. "No, not his lawyer. I received a call from the Chief of Police of Chicago." Brody frowned. "The chief? Why?" "Because," Harrison explained, his voice descending into a terrified whisper. "The chief just received a call from the Secretary of the Navy." Brody froze, the energy drink crushed in his hand. Harrison continued, turning his attention back to Andre. "There is a team of federal agents from NCIS and the FBI currently landing a helicopter on the roof of the parking garage. They are not seeking permission." Andre slowly stood up. He adjusted his tunic. He retrieved his cap from the table and brushed it off. "Officer Brody," Andre stated, "I informed you that you had 12 minutes. This is a mistake," Brody stammered. "I followed protocol." He resisted. "You assaulted a senior officer of the United States Armed Forces while he was traveling under federal orders," Andre elucidated. And you did so on camera." The door to the holding area burst open with a resounding crash. 3 men in suits entered. They were not airport security personnel. They were not Chicago PD. They wore earpieces and lapel pins that glinted in the subdued lighting. Leading them was a man Andre recognized, Admiral Thomas Iron Mike Reynolds, commander of Naval Special Warfare Command. He was dressed in civilian attire, a polo shirt and slacks, likely having been summoned from a golf course or a nearby meeting. However, his presence filled the room with the palpable intensity of an approaching thunderhead. Reynolds ignored the uniformed officers. He walked directly to Andre. "Andre," the Admiral said, "are you all right, son? A broken rib, sir. Wrist is sprained. Dignity is a bit bruised." Reynolds then turned. His gaze, famously capable of inducing stammering in senators during budget hearings, fixed intently on Officer Brody. Brody instinctively took a step back, colliding with the wall. "Who is the individual who laid hands on my officer?" Reynolds inquired, his voice deceptively calm. Captain Harrison pointed a trembling finger at Brody. Reynolds advanced toward Brody, stopping directly nose to nose with the officer. "Officer," Reynolds stated, "do you comprehend the purpose of this man's presence here today?" "Traveling?" Brody squeaked. "He was traveling to attend his father's funeral," Reynolds declared. "He is a Gold Star son. He has deployed 8 times. He has saved more American lives than you have written traffic tickets. And you put him on the floor. He refused to present identification," Brody lied desperately. We have the video," one of the suited men interjected, holding up a smartphone. "The audio is crystal clear. He offered his ID. You refused to examine it." Reynolds nodded his assent. "You are finished. But before we discuss your termination, we must address the federal charges." "Federal?" Brody paled. "Deprivation of rights under color of law. the suited man stated. "Assaulting a federal officer, unlawful detainment, and given that you destroyed his uniform, destruction of government property." Brody looked pleadingly at Captain Harrison. "Cap, help me." Harrison shook his head. "You are on your own, Rick. Hand over your badge and weapon. Now. Immediately." As Brody shakily unbuckled his gun belt, Andre spoke. "Admiral," Andre stated. "Yes, Commander," Reynolds replied. I would like to make a statement before we depart." "Proceed." Andre walked up to Brody, who was now stripped of his weapon and badge, appearing small and deflated in his sweat-stained uniform shirt. "I do not desire your badge," Andre declared. "I do not require your apology. I wish for you to grasp a fundamental truth. Power is not derived from the weapon on your hip. It stems from the discipline to refrain from its use when unwarranted. You demonstrably failed that test." Andre then turned to the Admiral. "Let us depart, sir. I have a funeral to attend." But just as they turned to exit, the door swung open once more. A woman in a sharply tailored blazer entered, carrying a briefcase. This was Patricia Vance, the most formidable civil rights attorney in Chicago. "Wait, no," Vance announced. "Patricia Thorne? No, Patricia Sterling? Number Patricia Graves." "Not so fast, gentlemen." Patricia Graves stepped forward. "I represent the airport authority. We need to discuss the media situation unfolding outside." "Media?" Harrison inquired, taken aback. "CNN is broadcasting live from the lobby," Graves stated. "Fox is setting up. The BBC is on the phone. The video has garnered 4 million views. The hashtag #hashfired is trending globally at #1. Protests are actively underway at baggage claim." Reynolds allowed himself a faint smile, a cold, predatory grin. "Excellent," the Admiral stated. "Let them film. I want the entire world to witness the consequences of tampering with my family. The transition from the claustrophobic confines of the holding cell to the vast expanse of the main terminal atrium felt akin to emerging from a submarine into a raging hurricane. Lieutenant Commander Andre Bishop harbored a singular desire: to simply vanish. He craved the gentle hum of the highway, the quiet solitude of his rental car, and the hushed tranquility of his family's living room. However, the universe, amplified by the relentless machinery of the internet, had decidedly different plans. As the heavy security doors swung open, the intense glare of flashbulbs momentarily blinded them. It was not merely the local news crews present. In the mere 35 minutes Andre had been detained, the digital ecosystem had mobilized with astonishing swiftness. Live streamers equipped with gimbal-stabilized smartphones, freelance photographers, and a throng of concerned citizens formed a formidable phalanx around the exit. Commander Bishop. Commander Bishop. Did he utter a racial slur? Officer Brody. Why did you tackle a veteran? Is the Navy filing charges? Admiral Reynolds strategically positioned himself in front of Andre, utilizing his broad shoulders to establish a physical barrier. The Admiral raised a hand, not in a gesture of greeting, but in a commanding motion for silence. Astonishingly, the chaotic clamor subsided into a hushed reverence. "Commander Bishop is currently on bereavement leave," Reynolds announced, his voice projecting with remarkable clarity, even without amplification. "He is in mourning for his father. He was subjected to assault and unlawful detainment. He will not be responding to inquiries today. However, rest assured, the United States Navy views the mistreatment of its personnel with the utmost seriousness." The assembled crowd erupted in cheers. Someone shouted, "Thank you for your service." Yet, the true drama was not unfolding during Andre's departure. It was unfolding with Officer Rick Brody. Captain Harrison had made a calculated, perhaps even vindictive decision. He did not escort Brody out through a discreet rear exit. Instead, he marched him out through the same primary exit, directly behind the Admiral. Brody was no longer adorned with his badge. His duty belt was absent, leaving his trousers precariously sagging. He appeared almost stripped bare, without the accoutrements of his authority. When the crowd spotted him, the prevailing mood abruptly shifted from admiration to outright vitriol. "Shame!" a woman dressed as a flight attendant yelled. "Bully! Take his pension!" Brody kept his head bowed, but his eyes darted frantically, desperately searching for a friendly face. He found none. He saw the faces of individuals he had likely berated, inconvenienced, or intimidated throughout his tenure. The airport was no longer his domain. It had become an arena, and the assembled populace were ravenous lions. A young man appearing to be no more than 20 years of age stepped forward. He held up a smartphone, playing the video of the aggressive tackle on a continuous loop. "I witnessed what you did. You relished it," Brody snapped. The accumulated adrenaline and overwhelming humiliation boiled over. He stopped, glaring accusingly at the young man. "Back off," Brody shouted at the crowd. "I was performing my duty." He failed to comply. "You have no idea what it's like dealing with these people." The crowd collectively gasped. The phrase, "these people," hung in the air like a cloud of toxic smoke. Jennifer Cole, and a sharp-witted reporter for WGN-TV, thrust a microphone toward him. "Officer Brody, by these people, are you referring to African-American servicemen, or merely anyone who questions your authority?" Brody's face contorted, turning a deep shade of purple. "I meant people who believe the rules do not apply to them. He thinks that because he possesses a trident emblazoned on his chest, he is somehow above the law. I am the law within this terminal." Captain Harrison firmly grasped Brody's arm. "Shut up, Rick. You're digging your own grave. Get off me." Brody yanked his arm away violently. "I am contacting my union representative. This is a setup." Amidst the escalating chaos, Andre paused. He turned slowly to observe Brody one final time. His expression was not one of anger. It conveyed a profound, pitying disappointment. You still do not comprehend," Andre stated, his voice cutting through the din. "The uniform does not define the man, Brody. The man imbues the uniform with significance. I am departing, sir. I have a funeral to attend." But as they turned to leave, the door opened once more. A woman in a sharp blazer entered, holding a briefcase. This was Patricia Graves, the most formidable civil rights attorney in Chicago. "Not so fast, gentlemen," Patricia Graves declared. "I represent the airport authority. We need to discuss the developing media situation outside." "Media?" Harrison questioned, astonished. "CNN is broadcasting live from the lobby," Graves stated. "Fox is setting up their equipment. The BBC is on the line. The video has garnered 4 million views. The hashtag #hashfired is currently trending #1 globally, as demonstrations are commencing at baggage claim." Reynolds allowed himself a faint smile, a cold, predatory grin. "Excellent," the Admiral declared. "Let them film. I want the entire world to witness the consequences of tampering with my family." The transition from the claustrophobic confines of the holding cell to the vast expanse of the main terminal atrium felt akin to emerging from a submarine into a raging hurricane. Lieutenant Commander Andre Bishop harbored a singular desire: to simply vanish. He craved the gentle hum of the highway, the quiet solitude of his rental car, and the hushed tranquility of his family's living room. However, the universe amplified by the relentless machinery of the internet had decidedly different plans. As the heavy security doors swung open, the intense glare of flashbulbs momentarily blinded them. It was not merely the local news crews present. In the mere 35 minutes Andre had been detained, the digital ecosystem had mobilized with astonishing swiftness. Live streamers equipped with gimbal-stabilized smartphones, freelance photographers, and a throng of concerned citizens formed a formidable phalanx around the exit. Commander Bishop. Commander Bishop. Did he utter a racial slur? "Officer Brody, why did you tackle a veteran? Is the Navy filing charges?" Admiral Reynolds strategically positioned himself in front of Andre, utilizing his broad shoulders to establish a physical barrier. The Admiral raised a hand not in a gesture of greeting, but in a commanding motion for silence. Astonishingly, the chaotic clamor subsided into a hushed reverence. "Commander Bishop is currently on bereavement leave," Reynolds announced, his voice projecting with remarkable clarity, even without amplification. "He is in mourning for his father. He was subjected to assault and unlawful detainment. He will not be responding to inquiries today. However, rest assured, the United States Navy views the mistreatment of its personnel with the utmost seriousness." The assembled crowd erupted in cheers. Someone shouted, "Thank you for your service." Yet the true drama was not unfolding during Andre's departure. It was unfolding with Officer Rick Brody. Captain Harrison had made a calculated, perhaps even vindictive decision. He did not escort Brody out through a discreet rear exit. Instead, he marched him out through the same primary exit, directly behind the Admiral. Brody was no longer adorned with his badge. His duty belt was absent, leaving his trousers precariously sagging. He appeared almost stripped bare without the accoutrements of his authority. When the crowd spotted him, the prevailing mood abruptly shifted from admiration to outright vitriol. "Shame!" a woman dressed as a flight attendant yelled. "Bully, take his pension!" Brody kept his head bowed, but his eyes darted frantically, desperately searching for a friendly face. He found none. He saw the faces of individuals he had likely berated, inconvenienced, or intimidated throughout his tenure. The airport was no longer his domain. It had become an arena, and the assembled populace were ravenous lions. A young man, appearing to be no more than 20 years of age, stepped forward. He held up a smartphone, May playing the video of the aggressive tackle on a continuous loop. "I witnessed what you did. You relished it," Brody snapped. The accumulated adrenaline and overwhelming humiliation boiled over. He stopped, glaring accusingly at the young man. "Back off!" Brody shouted at the crowd. "I was performing my duty. He failed to comply. You have no idea what it's like dealing with these people." The crowd collectively gasped. The phrase, "these people," hung in the air like a cloud of toxic smoke. Jennifer Cole, a sharp-witted reporter for WGN-TV, thrust a microphone toward him. "Officer Brody, by these people, are you referring to African-American servicemen or merely anyone who questions your authority?" Brody's face contorted, turning a deep shade of purple. "I meant people who believe the rules do not apply to them. He thinks that because he possesses a trident emblazoned on his chest, he is somehow above the law. I am the law within this terminal." Captain Harrison firmly grasped Brody's arm. "Shut up, Rick. You're digging your own grave. Get off me." Brody yanked his arm away violently. "I am contacting my union representative. This is a setup." Amidst the escalating chaos, Andre paused. He turned slowly to observe Brody one final time. His expression was not one of anger. It conveyed a profound, pitying disappointment. "You still do not comprehend," Andre stated, his voice cutting through the din. "The uniform does not define the man, Brody. The man imbues the uniform with significance. Your reputation suffered long before this moment." Andre departed, stepping into the crisp Chicago air, the Admiral beside him like a protective shadow. As Brody remained, a solitary figure bathed in flashing lights, surrounded by hundreds. He realized far too late that he had just provided the media with the soundbite that would obliterate his existence. 48 hours later, while the digital world spins at breakneck speed, the wheels of justice typically turn at a glacial pace. In this instance, however, the momentum was relentless and forceful. Rick Brody found himself seated in the plush, leather-adorned office of Arthur Pendleton, a legal counsel renowned throughout Chicago's inner circles as the Fixer. Pendleton was costly, smarmy, and remarkably adept at extricating problematic officers from sticky situations. His countenance bore the unmistakable etching of years spent indulging in scotch and disreputable dealings. "This is a catastrophe, Rick," Pendleton declared, sliding a tablet across his ornate mahogany desk. "An absolute, unmitigated disaster." "It's being taken out of context," Brody countered, pacing the confines of the room. He was clad in an ill-fitting suit, attempting to project an image of respectability. The footage begins mid-altercation. He was acting aggressively. He had that look, you know, that 1,000-yard stare. I felt threatened. I thought he might be suffering from PTSD and could snap. Pendleton sighed, massaging his temples. "Rick, listen to me. You apprehended a decorated Navy SEAL commander who was en route to inter his father. This man has an impeccable service record. He dedicates his free time to animal shelters. He mentors at-risk youth. He is quite literally the embodiment of American valor. And you? I've reviewed your personnel file." Pendleton opened a manila folder. 3 excessive force complaints in 2022, 2 accusations of racial profiling in 2023, and a sexual harassment allegation from a TSA agent that was resolved prior to trial. You're hardly Captain America. That's just the job, Brody insisted. You have to break a few eggs. People complain when they get caught. The issue, Rick, Pendleton stated, tapping a gold pen against his desk, is that this time you broke a Fabergé egg. The Navy isn't just pursuing charges, they are actively hunting you. The Pentagon's General Counsel has already engaged with the District Attorney's Office. They are threatening to withhold federal funding for the airport if appropriate accountability isn't met. So what do we do? Brody inquired, his voice laced with tremor. I can't go to prison. Cops don't fare well behind bars. Pendleton leaned back, interlacing his fingers. We have to reframe the narrative. We cannot prevail based on the facts. The facts, as they stand, paint you as having assaulted a war hero. We must win through character assassination. Discredit him. Obscure the truth. Pendleton corrected himself. We need to unearth damaging information about Andre Bishop, an ex-girlfriend who claims he was violent. A bar brawl in 2010. Anything. We leak it to the online tabloids. We portray him as an unstable killing machine who provoked you. We aim to convince the jury that you were protecting the airport from a ticking time bomb. I'm learning, Brody said, a flicker of a smile gracing his lips for the first time in days. I can do that. I have connections in Vice. They can run his background, dig deep. Proceed discreetly, Pendleton cautioned. If the Navy discovers you conducting unauthorized background checks on a SEAL, they will ensure you spend a considerable amount of time incarcerated. Brody nodded, a surge of hope coursing through him. He wasn't defeated yet. He retrieved his phone and dialed a number. Hey, Gary, Brody whispered. Yeah, it's me. Look, I need a favor. I need you to run a ghost file on someone. Andre Bishop. Yeah, the SEAL. Dig deep, Gary. Find me something incriminating. While Brody meticulously plotted his counter-offensive, Andre Bishop stood in a cemetery in Cahokia, Illinois. A brisk wind swept across the meticulously maintained grounds. The mournful notes of a bagpiper playing Amazing Grace drifted thinly through the chilly air. Andre stood at attention as the honor guard meticulously folded the flag that had draped his father's casket. Their movements were precise, creating crisp, triangular folds that encased the stars and stripes into a compact bundle. On behalf of the President of the United States Army, and a grateful nation, a young corporal presented the folded flag to Andre's mother. She wept silently, clutching the triangular cloth to her chest. Andre placed his hand on her shoulder, his grip firm and comforting. He felt a vibration from his pocket. He initially disregarded it. It vibrated again and then again. Following the ceremony, as the mourners began to disperse towards their vehicles, Andre checked his phone. It was a text message from Admiral Reynolds. Do not engage with the media. Do not go online. We have intelligence indicating Brody's associates are attempting to uncover damaging information. Remain unblemished. We are managing the situation. Andre looked at his phone, then at his father's freshly turned grave. They want a fight, Dad, he whispered. He recalled his father's counsel from years prior, when Andre was a mere recruit in BUD/S, bruised and on the verge of quitting. Andre, never wrestle with a pig. You both end up filthy, and the pig relishes it. You don't wrestle the pig, you eliminate it. Andre typed a reply to the Admiral. Understood, sir. But I'm not hiding. If they come for me, I'm prepared. He was unaware that the damaging information Brody sought simply did not exist. However, what Brody was about to discover, or rather, what was about to discover Brody, was far more dire. Officer Brody sat in his basement, surrounded by empty beer cans and the ethereal blue glow of his computer monitors. He had been suspended without pay. His wife had taken their children to her sister's residence in Wisconsin until the situation stabilized. The silence in the house was oppressive. He was browsing online police forums, seeking solidarity. Brody got a raw deal. Those soldiers think they own the place. The comments were a balm to his ego. You see, he wasn't the villain. He was the victim of a politically correct mob. His phone buzzed. It was Gary, his contact in Vice. Rick, sit down. Gary's voice sounded strained, taut. Yeah? What did you find on Bishop? Drug use, DUIs. Nothing, Rick. The guy's a saint. Pays his taxes early. Credit score of 820. Sponsors a child in Sudan. Ash, there's absolutely nothing. Brody slammed his fist onto the desk. There has to be something. Keep looking. Rick, listen to me, Gary hissed. I'm not calling about Bishop. I'm calling about you. Brody froze. What about me? When I ran the search, it triggered an alert. Not a police alert, a federal alert. FBI. So, they're investigating the airport incident? No, Rick, this alert is old. It's from 6 months ago. The feds have been monitoring the airport security detail, specifically the cargo exit lane. Brody felt a chill creep up his spine. His stomach plummeted. The cargo lane. They have wiretaps, Rick. They have video. They're aware of the expedited fees for the international couriers. They know about the cash exchanges. Brody dropped the phone. The airport scam. It was a straightforward operation. Brody and 2 other officers, Miller and Kowalski, would identify couriers transporting substantial sums of cash or high-value items like watches and jewelry, which they wished to avoid declaring for customs duties. Brody would intercept them, threaten a full audit, and then accept a cash payment to allow them to pass through a blind spot near the employee exit. This had been ongoing for 2 years. They had profited approximately $200,000 between them. It was intended to be untraceable, but if the FBI had been monitoring, Brody's assault on Andre Bishop hadn't merely been an assault case, it had drawn the unwavering attention of authority directly onto a criminal enterprise. Brody scrambled to his feet. He had to dispose of the ledger. He kept a small notebook in his safe, detailing dates, times, key payouts, his insurance policy, in case Miller ever attempted to cut him out. Now it was evidence. He sprinted to the wall safe concealed behind a painting of the Chicago skyline. He spun the dial. Right 14, left 32, right 8. The safe clicked open. It was empty. Brody stared into the dark metal compartment. The ledger was gone. The emergency cash, amounting to approximately $15,000, had also vanished. And on the metal shelf sat a single piece of paper. Brody picked it up. It was a business card. Thick cardstock, raised lettering. Douglas Sterling, private investigator. Note, using the surname Sterling as a generic strong name, distinct from the restricted list if necessary. Or let's pivot to Douglas Stone to be safe regarding constraints. Correction. The card read, Douglas Stone, a forensic accountant and private investigations. On the reverse, inscribed in elegant script, was a handwritten message. Karma is a boomerang, Rick. See you in court. Brody whirled around, paralyzed by fear. Someone had been inside his home. The doorbell rang. It wasn't a typical ring, it was a prolonged, insistent press. Brody moved to the window and peered through the blinds. His front lawn was swarming with black SUVs. Not police cruisers, but Suburbans, the kind with tinted windows and government plates. Men in FBI windbreakers fanned out across his lawn. A battering ram was being carried up the driveway. Yet standing in the middle of the driveway, observing calmly, was a man in a wheelchair. He was an elderly African-American, wearing a VFW, Veterans of Foreign Wars cap. This was Elias Bishop's closest friend, Sergeant Major Marcus Washington, retired. Wait, Marcus is on the no-fly list. Let's call him Sergeant Major Top-Tier Jenkins. Jenkins was Andre's godfather. He had served as a reconnaissance marine in Vietnam. He had sustained leg injuries in Hughes City and possessed extensive connections. Jenkins observed the house, noticed the movement behind the blinds, and offered a sharp, derisive salute. Police search warrant. Boom. The front door splintered inward. Brody didn't attempt to flee. There was nowhere to escape. As federal agents threw him to the ground, zip ties cinching his wrists, he grasped the full extent of his miscalculation. He hadn't merely assaulted a seal, he had inadvertently toppled the first domino in his own downfall. And the architect of this ruin wasn't Andre, but the very system he had exploited for years, and finally exacting its retribution. The federal courthouse in downtown Chicago, a formidable structure of glass and steel designed to diminish the individual and amplify the gravitas of the law, felt like a tomb to former officer Rick Brody. 6 months had elapsed since the incident at O'Hare. The world had moved on to new viral sensations, but the judicial machinery had only just begun its relentless grind. Brody sat at the defense table, having shed 30 pounds. His suit hung loosely on his frame, resembling a shroud. His complexion was sallow, a consequence of house arrest and sleepless nights. Beside him sat Sarah Jenkins, a public defender. Arthur Pendleton, his costly hired gun, had abandoned him the moment the federal RICO charges were filed. Pendleton didn't represent sinking vessels, and he only boarded those with a chance of staying afloat. The courtroom was packed. The Navy had dispatched a JAG observer. The press gallery was full, and in the front row, seated ramrod straight in his dress blues, was Commander Andre Bishop. Andre had received a promotion. The golden stripes on his sleeves were now thicker. He averted his gaze from Brody, his eyes fixed on the Great Seal of the United States displayed behind the judge's bench. Assistant U.S. Attorney David Ross, a prosecutor known for dismantling corrupt public officials, stood. He was a shark in a charcoal suit. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Ross began, pacing deliberately. "This case originated with a simple act of ego. A police officer, sworn to protect, decided to intimidate a man he perceived as vulnerable. In doing so, however, he dislodged a stone and exposed the rot beneath." Ross queued up the video. Not the viral footage of the takedown, but a different recording. The courtroom screens flickered to life, displaying grainy, black-and-white surveillance footage from the airport's employee exit, dated 4 months prior to the incident. Despite the coarse resolution, the faces were discernible. It depicted Brody and Officer Kowalski standing near the door. A man in a tracksuit approached them. He handed Brody a thick white envelope. Brody, without inspecting its contents, simply nodded and swiped his keycard, bypassing the security scanner. The man in the tracksuit proceeded through, carrying a duffel bag that had not undergone X-ray screening. That bag, Ross stated, gesturing towards the screen, contained 4 kilograms of fentanyl, like enough to claim the lives of half the population of Chicago. A collective gasp rippled through the jury. Brody closed his eyes. The defendant was unaware of the bag's contents, Ross continued, and he didn't care. He was compensated $5,000 to open that door. He bartered the safety of his city for the price of a used Honda. Ross turned to face Brody. "You didn't merely assault Commander Bishop because he was impeding your progress. You assaulted him because you were on edge. You were terrified. You were engaged in a criminal enterprise and perceived a threat in everyone." It was time for the defense. However, no defense was possible. The evidence meticulously compiled by the FBI, triggered solely by the viral video drawing attention to Brody's specific post, was overwhelming. House of the Ghost File investigation had unearthed wiretap recordings, bank transfer records, and the missing ledger, which Top Jenkins had been instrumental in locating. The true drama, however, unfolded during the sentencing hearing. Brody was granted the opportunity to make a statement. He stood, trembling. I just want to say I'm sorry," Brody mumbled. "I was under a lot of stress. I made a mistake." Judge Sylvia Black peered over her spectacles. She was a woman who had witnessed a lifetime of human folly and was unimpressed by nothing. "A mistake is forgetting to signal a turn, Mr. Brody," Judge Black declared, her voice as sharp as a diamond saw. "Systematically dismantling public trust for personal gain is not a mistake. It is a betrayal." She turned her attention to Andre Bishop. "Commander Bishop, do you wish to speak?" Andre rose and walked to the podium. The courtroom fell into absolute silence. "Your Honor," Andre stated, "my father, Master Sergeant Elias Bishop, instilled in me the principle that authority is a responsibility, not a weapon. Mr. Brody forgot the weight of the badge. I do not harbor animosity towards him. I pity him, for he traded his honor for transient power, and now he possesses neither." Andre met Brody's gaze. "I forgive you, Rick, because harboring anger is akin to ingesting poison and expecting another to perish. However, forgiveness does not absolve one from consequences." Judge Black nodded and banged her gavel. "Rick Brody, on the charge of deprivation of rights under color of law, I sentence you to 10 years. On the charges of racketeering and conspiracy to distribute narcotics, I sentence you to 15 years. These sentences are to be served consecutively." You will serve a total of 25 years in a federal correctional institution. You are remanded into custody immediately. 25 years. Brody's knees buckled. He collapsed into his chair, sobbing uncontrollably. The bailiffs moved in, hoisting him up as they cuffed him. Real steel cuffs, not the plastic zip ties. He looked back towards the gallery, searching for his wife, Linda. She was there, but she wasn't weeping. She stood beside a man Brody didn't recognize, a divorce attorney. She met Brody's gaze, held it for a moment, and then turned her back. She exited the courtroom, leaving him utterly alone. The harsh karmic retribution didn't arrive in a single, overwhelming wave. It wasn't a lightning strike. It was a slow, easy, suffocating erosion of everything Rick Brody had ever constructed, a dismantling of his life, brick by painstaking brick, all while he watched from behind shatterproof glass. Federal Correctional Institution Terre Haute is a far cry from the bustling, dynamic halls of O'Hare International Airport. For inmate 48293018, formerly Officer Brody, the transition was a psychological meat grinder. At the airport, Brody had navigated with a swagger that commanded space. He was the apex predator in the ecosystem, the man wielding the taser and the authority. Within the FCI, the hierarchy was inverted. He was a former law enforcement officer placed within a general population unit. While he wasn't in immediate physical peril due to protective segregation protocols, the isolation served as its own form of torment. Thus, his world had contracted from a sprawling terminal accommodating thousands to a 6-by-8-foot concrete cell. The uniform that had once afforded him immunity was replaced by a drab khaki jumpsuit that branded him as the property of the Bureau of Prisons. But the most agonizing aspect wasn't the sustenance, the incessant noise, or the perpetual fluorescent glare that buzzed like a trapped insect. It was the silence emanating from the outside world. During the initial month, Brody checked the mail daily, eagerly awaiting letters from his colleagues, the men he'd shared beers with, the ones who had sworn unwavering loyalty. Day 30, no correspondence. Day 60, still nothing. Day 90, a solitary letter arrived from the Fraternal Order of Police, informing him that his membership had been revoked and his pension benefits were being frozen pending civil litigation. The blue wall of silence had failed to protect him. Instead, it had effectively walled him out. To them, he wasn't a fallen brother, but a malignant cancer that had been excised to save the patient. Sitting on his thin mattress, he realized he had never truly possessed friends. Only accomplices, and accomplices, he now understood, did not write letters. While Brody languished in Indiana, the destructive ripple effects of his actions decimated his life in the Chicago suburbs. His wife, Linda, was a woman of pragmatic resolve. She had stood by him through his drinking, his temper, and his prolonged absences. However, she could not endure the profound humiliation. The viral video had not only exposed Brody's cruelty, but had subjected their family to a level of public scrutiny that rendered their lives untenable. News vans camped on their lawn for weeks. Death threats arrived in the mail. The bank, citing a morality clause and the sudden freezing of assets due to the federal investigation, foreclosed on their mortgage. 6 months into Brody's sentence, a for sale sign appeared in front of their Elm Street residence. Linda did not inform Rick of this development in person. She dispatched a lawyer. The divorce papers were served to Brody in the visitation room. He sat there staring at the document through the plexiglass, searching the lawyer's face for any flicker of sympathy. There was none. "She's reclaiming her maiden name," the lawyer stated, closing his briefcase. "Yes, and she's relocating to Wisconsin. She does not wish for you to contact her." "What about the house?" Brody inquired, his voice hoarse from disuse. "My den. My memorabilia." "Sold at auction to cover legal fees," the lawyer replied. "Most of it went for pennies on the dollar. Nobody wanted the framed jerseys of a disgraced officer." Brody watched the lawyer depart. He placed his hand on the glass. He had dedicated his career to incarcerating others, convinced he was safeguarding his domain. Now he possessed no domain, and he was the one confined within a cage. But the most profound blow, the unexpected twist no one anticipated, centered on Jason Brody. At 18 years old, Jason was the spitting image of his father, 6'2", broad-shouldered, the star linebacker of his high school team. For years, Rick had meticulously groomed him. "You're going to be a cop, Jace," he'd insisted. "You're going to carry the shield. You're going to run this town." Jason had believed him, idolizing his father until he witnessed the video. He saw his father, a man who espoused principles of respect, law, and order, assaulting a grieving individual who stood perfectly still. He observed the fear in his father's eyes, not fear of a threat, but fear directed at a black man possessing more dignity than himself. The shame fractured something within Jason. He quit the football team. He stopped wearing his varsity jacket. He could no longer walk through the hallways without feeling the weight of his classmates' gazes. "That's the bully's kid," they whispered. Jason faced a critical juncture. He could succumb to bitterness, already harboring resentment towards the system that had incarcerated his father, the media, and Andre Bishop. He could descend into the same toxic masculinity that had consumed Rick. Instead, Jason sought refuge in the library. He read about the Navy SEALs, their rigorous ethical code, their quiet professionalism, and their motto, "The only easy day was yesterday." He realized that the man his father had attacked embodied everything his father aspired to be, but failed to achieve. 2 days after his high school graduation, while his father remained incarcerated in a cell in Terre Haute, Jason Brody walked into a recruitment office. "Name?" the recruiter inquired, glancing at his clipboard. "Jason," he replied. He paused. "Jason Miller." He adopted his mother's maiden name. He wasn't fleeing his past. He was consciously choosing to forge a new future. "What are you seeking, son?" "I want to be a corpsman," Jason stated firmly. "I want to save lives, and I want to serve with the Marines." 14 months later, at the Great Lakes Naval Training Center, north of Chicago, a biting wind swept off Lake Michigan, slicing through the immaculate white uniforms of the newly graduated recruit contingent. The graduation was sharp, precise, and impressive. Seated prominently was Captain Andre Bishop, the distinguished guest of honor, having recently received another promotion. His presence was commanding, radiating an almost palpable energy. He was attired in his dress whites, adorned with a vibrant array of ribbons on his chest, a vivid testament to a career dedicated to service. He was not present to discuss the unfortunate airport incident. That was a topic he never broached. His purpose was to speak about leadership. True fortitude, Andre's voice resonated across the parade grounds, is not found in the dominion you exercise over others. It resides within the dominion you possess over yourself. It is the resolve to act with kindness when weary, with fairness when provoked, and with humility when triumphant. Within the assembled ranks, Seaman Apprentice Jason Miller stood rigidly at attention, tears tracing paths down his cheeks. Each word spoken by the captain seemed to be a direct message to him, and to the spectral image of the father he had left behind. Following the ceremony, the newly minted sailors dispersed to embrace their families. Jason remained isolated, his mother unable to make the journey from Wisconsin. He observed Captain Bishop moving through the gathering, offering handshakes and posing for photographs. Jason felt an instinct to withdraw, to melt into the anonymity of the crowd. Yet an unyielding force propelled him forward, a deep-seated yearning for resolution. He stepped directly into Captain Bishop's path, executing a salute so crisp his hand seemed to quiver against his cover. "Good afternoon, Captain." Andre returned the salute with deliberate slowness, his gaze fixing on the young man before him. He perceived a familiar quality in the eyes, a resemblance in the jawline and the build. It was the face of Rick Brody, yet devoid of its characteristic sneer, a visage seemingly purified by discipline and humility. Andre's eyes flickered to the name tag. Miller. The realization dawned instantly. This young man had shed his patronymic to reclaim his honor. "At ease, sailor," Andre stated, his tone softening to a more personal cadence. "Sir," Jason stammered, I just wanted to express my gratitude for your address and for your actions that day, for remaining composed." Andre studied him intently. "You know who I am?" "Yes, sir," Jason whispered. "My father is Rick Brody." A profound silence stretched between them, lasting for 5 heartbeats, during which the surrounding throng seemed to vanish. It was a moment suspended between the victim and the perpetrator's son. Andre did not flinch or show any sign of distress. Instead, he stepped closer, placing a firm, reassuring hand on Jason's shoulder. "You are not your father," Andre said gently. "You are the man you have chosen to be. And looking at you now, wearing these colors, I can confidently say you have made an excellent choice." "I'm attempting to rectify things, sir," Jason choked out. "You already have," Andre replied with a smile. "Your father is confined within a prison of his own creation. Do not choose to reside there with him. You are liberated. Do you comprehend? You are free." Andre reached into his pocket, producing a substantial coin, a challenge coin from SEAL Team 6. He placed it into Jason's open palm, closing the young man's fingers around it. "Carry this," Andre instructed. "When challenges arise, and they will, remember that you have earned your place here. Dismissed, sailor." "Yes, sir." Jason watched as Andre departed, a commanding figure in white. He opened his hand, the golden trident glinting in the sunlight. Meanwhile, back in Tarut, Rick Brody sat in the communal area, his attention fixed on a small television mounted in the corner. The broadcast was covering the Navy graduation at Great Lakes, displaying footage of the ceremony. Brody squinted, his gaze intensifying as the camera swept across the assembled new sailors. For a fleeting instant, the image froze on a tall, broad-shouldered young man conversing with Captain Andre Bishop. The young man wore a genuine, proud smile, a rare sight that Brody hadn't witnessed on his son's face in years. Brody's plastic cup of lukewarm coffee slipped from his grasp, splashing onto his shoes. That's my boy," he murmured to the empty room. "That's my Jace." However, the inmate beside him, marked by a jagged scar across his cheek, let out a derisive laugh. "Your boy? That kid's shaking hands with the legend who put you behind bars, man. Looks to me like he's his boy now." Brody stared at the screen as the segment concluded, the stark reality hitting him with the impact of a physical blow. He had forfeited his freedom, his family, and his fortune. But the ultimate soul-crushing irony, the one that would plague him every night for the ensuing 24 years, was this. His son had become a hero, emulating the very man Rick Brody had sought to dismantle. Andre Bishop had not merely defeated Brody in legal proceedings. He had effectively nurtured Brody's son into a better man than Brody himself could ever have been. Brody buried his face in his hands, overcome with emotion. This narrative illustrates how 12 minutes of arrogance irrevocably shattered a lifetime of authority. Officer Brody perceived himself as the apex predator, the shark in the aquarium, meat oblivious to the fact that the ocean teems with leviathans. He saw a black man in uniform and erroneously assumed vulnerability. He failed to recognize a warrior who had mastered the art of conflict long before stepping foot in that airport. The lesson here is a harsh but simple one. Respect is not an entitlement, it is a currency earned. Attempting to seize it leads to financial ruin. Brody lost his liberty, his family, and his reputation because he could not subdue his own ego. If you believe justice has been served and that character holds greater significance than rank, please engage with this content by liking it. Share this narrative to reinforce the universal truth that one should never judge a book by its cover, particularly when that book is a United States Navy SEAL. Additionally, remember to subscribe and activate the notification bell to ensure you never miss another story of authentic American justice. I look forward to sharing the next story with you.